Welcome to Say More from Boston Globe Opinion. I'm Shirley Leung. The Boston Globe offices are smack in the middle of the city by Faneuil Hall. Narrow winding streets, practically no parking, and almost everyone takes the T to work.
I take the red line.
I take the orange line.
I take the green line.
So we did a survey of our Globe colleagues about their morning commutes into the office.
From Savin Hill to Downtown Crossing.
From Ruggles all the way down to State.
From Union Square to Government Center.
We asked people what they think of the MBTA, our rickety, sputtering public transit system that can't seem to catch a break, from slow zones to derailments. The results were mixed.
In my experience, I would describe it as meh.
I'd call my commute straightforward.
It's either really excellent and it gets me to work ahead of time, or it's the inverse and I'm very late.
One of the things that I really value about Boston is the public transportation system and being a walkable city, and I don't have to rely on a car.
Maybe a better word would be unpredictable, honestly. Just because you never really know if you're going to have a good experience or not.
Park Street. The destination of this train is Cleveland Circle.
Public approval has been very low for a long time, but some of these words of encouragement made me think, hey, maybe the T is improving. That doesn't mean it's great, but sometimes I worry the T gets a bad rap.
Can I get anyone a drink?
I recently met with Phil Eng, the general manager of the T at his office in Boston. I first noticed a long line of well-worn hard hats by the window.
These are through my career. This is actually my very first hard hat that I started.
The hats span his many years as a transit engineer. He worked most of his life in New York.
So this one was from Superstorm Sandy. The contractor gave this to us because...
At the end of the line of hats is his white MBTA hard hat, complete with a nifty headlamp for seeing in dark tunnels.
Whatever's going around in this noggin of mine, I try to protect it, although,
Phil works at T headquarters at Park Plaza, and fittingly, trucks and buses can be heard from his office, the sounds of a busy city. I asked Phil why, when I go to Europe or Asia, I ride on really fast modern trains. And then I come back to Boston and wonder, why can't we have that here? Why can't we be like Berlin or Tokyo or Seoul?
Well, I will say one of the challenges that we have is being the oldest subway system in the U.S. Is that we had geometry, we had infrastructure that was designed for a different era. And when you have that and you compare it to newer agencies and newer infrastructure, the designs have improved over time. And when you have systems where they are interlinked geometries that you would never design in today's world, with curves that are built in slow zones as you go around tight curves. The Green Line, for instance, is a very big example, even though it is essentially restriction-free with the last piece that we will take care of in December. There are still areas where going around those tight curves that they will be slow. But what we can do is continue to make sure the trips and the trip times are reliable. And as those things improve, we can make those trips more frequent. And what I like to say is that there is character to the Boston's MBTA system. And there's a lot of, I think, pride in terms of the transit system. In fact, it was ranked, I believe, third in the nation in terms of best transit systems, meaning the available access that it provides, the importance of the system to the public, the community, and quality of life. And so I've talked to many people that have moved from other parts of the country as I ride the trains, and they come up to me and they say, we wish we had this kind of system where we live. So it's all comparative in terms of what you're used to. If we have some challenges because of the inherent designs, it's one where I love the character of it, and we're going to make sure that everything we can do is going to be taking care of the things that we should. That's the maintenance, that's the repairs, and then longer term, maybe some of those built-in things that were from 120 some odd years ago, we can start tackling with some of our capital program.
I've never heard a TGM describe our old subway system as having character. I mean, it's almost like saying an old house is charming, and that's code word for it needs a lot of renovation, a gut renovation.
Well, we are probably in the midst of a gut renovation right now, if you want to put it that way. The amount of work that's ongoing in the subways is unprecedented. And I don't even know if I could compare what we are doing here to what I've seen at other agencies. And it's a testament to the team here. And it's a testament to the public because of their patience that have allowed us to actually do it in this manner. We could never have accomplished the amount of work that we're doing in the traditional way of trying to do it on the open nights.
So, what's the city you think has the absolute best public transit and something Boston should aspire to?
Well, I think when I first was introduced here, I said this was the best system in the world.
And no one believed you?
Well, you know what? It's our system. And I don't try to compare our system to others. I really don't. I really just try to see how do we make our system the best it can be, because people rely on it and they need it. And when it doesn't function, I certainly understand why they get frustrated.
So earlier you talked about how the T is unique because of these curves on the Green Line, for example. So can you explain that a little bit more? What do you mean by curves? I mean, other transit systems, of course, they have curves too, but what makes our curves particularly difficult to deal with?
Well, some of these, they appear to be almost like 90-degree turns.
Who came up with that idea?
Well, I'm assuming back in the day they wanted to follow certain routes.
I see.
The trolleys probably being on the street systems went around the existing infrastructure that existed.
Yeah.
I haven't gone back in history to understand that. But back in those times, too, speed was probably not the main goal. It was just being able to use the trolley system to move people. And as time has passed, people are multitasking. People are trying to get around in a really, really busy day, maximize their time. And with so much infrastructure around, the ability to come in and just say, let's straighten out these curves impacts so many other facilities and so many other structures, and in many places, historic components too. And again, there's so much history in Massachusetts and Boston. And I think the MBTA is just part of that history, and they go side by side.
So, Phil, you've been at the T for about 18 months now. What do you see as the biggest problems still facing the T?
I think what I want to focus on is not just the delivery of the service and delivery of the projects, but I want to make sure that the long-term cultural shift that we're focused on, and making sure that this agency is one that is focused on solving problems, focused on the public that we serve. It's not just moving equipment and trains and buses. It's moving people and it's serving people. There's always a better way to continuously improve. And what I want people to do is think outside the box. Don't always look at it. It's been done this way for 30 years, and this is the way we need to keep doing it. There's ways to challenge ourselves, and that could be fun. It could be exciting. And it really is a team effort, though. And it's making sure that we have each other's back and that we build that culture of can do. Let's think it through. Let's solve problems, and let's deliver for the public and the communities. And people are embracing it. It's just a big culture shift, and focus on safety of the riders, focus on safety of the employees.
Phil, why don't you talk about money? I mean, everyone talks about how to fix the T, you need more money. I mean, I think former State Transportation Secretary Jim Aloisi has written that the T needs $115 billion over the next 15 years to truly fix the T from the capital side and the operating side. So do you need $115 billion?
Well, even last year when we announced the capital needs assessment based on our assets, that was a $24 billion total. But I also know that if I had $24 billion today, I couldn't spend all $24 billion in 1 year, nor could I deliver service and do the work, even if I wanted to try to spend $24 billion, because it really is making sure that even with the work we're doing today, alternative service is critical. It's very hard to replicate train service, right? So my goal is, and it's always been, even in robust years in prior roles, how do you deliver with what you have, right? And let me just explain that. If I had $24 billion, I might approach it a little more aggressively, but I still would need to make sure that lines are running, and where we're investing is not shutting down multiple lines because I could spend all the money. It's saying, how do you do it in a meaningful way that keeps the system safe? So if it's less than $24 billion, it's a little slower pace, but we can deliver safe, reliable service. And I think we're showing that today.
Yeah.
Right? I don't have $24 billion today, but all the work we've done on the track improvement program, because we've targeted and we've done it in a more expeditious, more cost-efficient way, is improving service, making it safer. Right? So that is one where it's not, oh my God, we're in trouble because I don't have $24 billion. It's, how do we keep the system safe, reliable? And that's what we're doing today. Now, from an operating perspective, certainly we all know that everyone is hard at work at figuring out how to cover that deficit that we're facing in 2026. But I also know we're not the only agency in the country that's facing. In fact, almost every single agency is facing that, right?
Yeah.
So I do believe that not only is it something where the state and they are focused on it, looking at that, not only our needs, but other agencies. But I also know the federal government is keeping an eye on that, and they are looking at, there is discussion from the federal side, and that's where we're staying engaged too, because it's not just us, it's across the board. But I do have a role. How do we get more efficient? How do we do more work with what we have? And how do we keep it safe and running? The track program, I just use that for an example. What we do in 1 day, I just had this analysis done because we're looking at the amount of work that is being performed. A 1 day with a full diversion, using multiple contractors, using multiple staff. Staff have equated 1 day of a full diversion to 3 months of overnight work.
Oh, wow.
So think about the inefficiencies of doing work in a 1 to 2 hour window every night. And in some cases, a lot of mobilization, a lot of paying for almost 8 hours of work, and really only getting 2 hours of track time. We're doing it in a more cost-effective manner. And we're actually having less impacts to the public, even though each diversion has impacts for those periods. But if we were stretching this out over a longer period of time, we actually impact people longer, and their trips are worse for a longer period of time.
More of my conversation with Phil Eng after this short break. So, Phil, you grew up in New York. I believe you're son of Chinese immigrants, ran a laundry business in Long Island, right?
Yes, born and raised in Long Island, yes.
And I think I've heard you talk about what you learned from your parents in terms of how to treat customers.
Well, so I've got so much that I learned from my parents in terms of what they believed in the Chinese hand laundry business. Dealing with the public, or the customers actually in this case, on a daily basis was part of their way of life. And they treated each customer individually, even though, one customer would have the same dress shirt as another one. Some would prefer more starch than another. And it was amazing to me how they did this in a way that made each customer feel special. And, from the public service perspective, customers want to know, or now riders and the public want to know that we're listening and that we're hearing and that we actually focus on their needs. And that really is what our role is. I can be saying, this is the way I think is best for you, but they also know in their daily travels what is important to them. And for me to hear that and listen to that and build that into our thought process is something that I think is really instrumental, because I might have said this earlier. It's not about just moving trains. It's about moving people. It's not about moving buses. It's about moving people. And it's people at the agency serving people. And I got a lot of that from my parents in terms of the way they focus on each person's needs. It's very touching to me when I realize how important the life's lessons I had from them. And it's exciting that, we can touch people's lives and we could touch it for the better. And lately I've been hearing some good feedback from our riders, and that makes me feel really, really good because if we make people's lives just a little bit better every day, and we don't add to the challenges, we're doing our job. And that's what it's all about, right? The life is tough, and we need to enjoy once in a while.
So how did you go from a kid in Long Island? I think you listening to the, Mets on the radio and your parents' Chinese laundry to working at the MTA and working for as an engineer with trains and buses and commuter rail.
Well, how did you even know that that's actually true, that I was in the laundry? I would help ironing shirts, and my dad would be listening to the Mets on the radio. But how did I go from that? It's interesting. In high school, I was always good in math and science, and my guidance counselor, I remember when we were looking at colleges, we're talking about careers, and engineering was something that came to mind, and I think it suited me well. But there was this other side of me that liked to be creative, and I had a strong interest in architecture and designing and thinking differently. I did stay in engineering, but as I graduated, joined Department of Transportation, and the ability to back in the 80s when I first started, actually, some of the things I saw was a lot of the bridges in New York City, because I worked in the New York City office. In the 80s, they were actually, due to a lack of investment, a lack of maintenance, they were in some tough shape. Mm-hmm. And I saw firsthand back then how to manage these mini crises. How do you keep people moving and make things safe? And then little by little through, working through the Department of Transportation, working with railroad agencies and moving on to MTA. It was just, I don't know how the natural progression was, but it was one where we touch so many people's lives, and whether it's a mega project or a small project in a smaller community, each of those have the same impacts to people.
So when you're on the subway or on a bus or the commuter rail, do you go out of your way to talk to commuters and ask them how it's going?
Well,
or do they come to you?
It's more that they come to me.
They come to you.
I try not to bother the riders unless they want to speak to me.
But they recognize you. They know who you are. Some
of
them
do recognize me.
Oh, yeah.
And it's very heartwarming that they want to come up and share their experiences. And I really have been blessed by the fact that so many people shared how much they rely on the T, how much they love the T, despite some of the challenges they've seen, and the fact that they're seeing improvements and they're feeling improvements.
So do you hear any complaints?
I heard some complaints when I remember way back, Packard's Corner, and I took the shuttle bus very early on because
Where's this? Where?
At Packard's Corner on the Green Line, where
Green
we
Line.
had
Okay.
a derailment last year, and we had to run alternative service. And I did get on the shuttle bus as I went out to the incident scene, and there was a rider who we've obviously interrupted their travel. And I certainly understand their frustration because they expect us to be able to get them to their destinations on time. And he was not very happy that he was on a shuttle bus. So I do get that kind of feedback, but I take that as constructive criticism. And it's important. Anyone who's willing to take the time to share their concerns, I was taught this way back, take that as a gift because they took the time to share that information with you. And each of those things we can learn from. And each of those are important to the rider because they need to know they're being heard.
Do you remember the first time we met?
Yes. Yes.
JFK UMass, right?
Just, yeah, you and your son, right?
Yeah, my son at the time he was 12 years old. He was riding the T he was going to be riding the T by himself for the first time, and we were on a practice run. He goes to BC High, so we were on a practice run together. And so Phil, you were in your vest. You had just arrived, and maybe only a few months into the job. And I remember you popped out looking at the station, and you were with Dennis
Farley, yes.
Yeah, another
My newly appointed chief of stations and facilities. And we were touring the Red Line.
Yes.
We wanted to see for ourselves some of the work that needed to be done. And yes, we ran into you and your son. And
Yeah.
I remember you telling us how you wanted to scope out his route and make sure it was
We did like
doable.
3 or 4 dry runs before school started, and I'm happy to report that he's still alive. He's still riding the T. It's been on time and safe. He hasn't been late to school or late because of sometimes there have been some delays, but he hasn't been late because of the T. So far, so good.
Well, I'm pleased to hear that. That was a fun day. I remember the photos we took, and
That's right.
And it was just a great coincidence. And but that's what I like to do. I like to get out, and that's one of the things that our whole management team, we have a different culture in terms of we want to get out and see the work. We want to get out and see the employees, and we want to get out and see the riders. And that interaction allows us to see firsthand where we can improve, where we can support our employees and our workforce, and make sure that they have the right tools to do their roles. And that is the key thing, I think, that is part of the culture shift too.
So shortly after Governor Healy was elected in 2022, I wrote a column declaring that the most important hire she would make is hiring the right TGM. And, Governor Baker, the previous governor, there had been like a revolving door of GMs. So have you always been attracted to big, messy problems? Because the T is a big, messy problem.
It is a little bit of truth that some of my friends in New York know me, that the greater the challenge maybe sort of like kind of gets me going to say, let me try it. I think I can do it. And it was maybe a little bigger than I thought initially, but guess what? We're making a difference.
You are making
and
progress.
we're really excited about it. And it's not just me. It really is the team we're building, and it's the workforce. They are so engaged. When I see the excitement of the operators, and I interact with them a lot. When I see the excitement of the laborers in the field, they are seeing that the T is moving in a different direction. And some of them who have been here long term are saying this is much needed, and they are super excited about it. And the ones that are newly hired have come on board because they see the direction we're going.
Over the years, I've met many TGM, and you have managed to do something that no other TGM has done, which is, or at least in the modern era, I should say, is that you're somewhat beloved. I mean, even though the T is far from perfect, in your short time here, whether it's online or in person, people, seem to like you, seem to like what you're doing. They don't tend to blame you. I mean, it's an incredibly long honeymoon, really. And so you've had. So what's the key to your leadership that you've somehow managed to win people over, even though the T still has a long way to go?
Well, I don't know what that is. Maybe I'm not a Yankee fan.
You're a Mets fan, right?
And the people say that's okay, that's better.
Yeah.
I think my goal is let the results speak for themselves. It's not me. It's the deliverables that the people are waiting for and the riders are waiting for. And if we are fulfilling that commitment, I think people appreciate it.
So I think your secret to success so far is transparency. I mean, I think you're an honest broker, you're a straight shooter. too many times team managers make promises they can't keep, and you just tell us that it's going to be bad before it's going to get better. I mean, and to me, it's like, suck it up. And it's also very Chinese, it's like very brutally honest. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything for you. And I think people appreciate that. Bostonians love honesty. I think you as a New Yorker have figured out that trick. So
I often say that it's better for me to just be transparent and tell everything like it is, because then I don't have to remember what I said the last time because it's the truth, right? That is important. The funny comment that you talk about is when you talk about Chinese culture and just saying it like it is, I think back to my mother, because she'll say anything she wants to anybody. And in a different world, that may offend so many people, but that is Mom. And I'm not going to try to change her.
As a Chinese mother myself, yes, that is my style as well. So that's exactly the response I want to hear from my sons. Anyways, Phil Eng is the general manager of the MBTA. Thank you for hosting us in your office here at Park Plaza T headquarters.
Well, thank you for having me. I truly enjoyed it. This was a great opportunity to just have a moment to decompress and just talk about some of the exciting things that are going on. And as much as the public has been giving me that honeymoon period, I'm truly enjoying my role here and couldn't be more blessed and privileged to be working here with everyone and having a chance to interact with all our riders.
Say More is a production of the Boston Globe. Today's episode was produced by Anna Kusmer with help from Mara Melitz. Our editor is Jim Dow. Our engineer is Uzair Ahmed. Our music is from APM Music. If you like the show, please follow us and leave us a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can email us at saymore@globe.com. I'm Shirley Leung. Thanks for listening.